Ohio Haitians get a reprieve. Welcome to Columbus on the Record. I'm Mike Thompson. Immigrants, advocates, churches, and local officials were ready, but the possible ICE surge aimed at Haitian immigrants in Ohio never came. That's because hours before the deadline, a federal judge blocked President Trump's attempt to end the Haitian immigrants' legal status. Their temporary protected status remains in effect while a legal challenge continues. The Trump administration has appealed the judge's ruling. Advocates say they remain prepared for future deportation efforts. Andrew Tobias, you were out there shortly before the deadline. They were prepared. What do they do now, the folks who are trying to fight this?
They're going to have to keep waiting. So what I gathered from talking to people while I was there, people were really expecting a deportation, like an immigration enforcement action. I don't know if it was as sure as they all thought it was in the community, but they're preparing for it. And leading up to that, I heard that there were Haitians who were basically staying in their house. Some stopped going to work. They're just kind of worried about what the future might hold for them. So I guess they're going to continue to be in a holding pattern and try to wait. If ICE does decide to come, I don't think they're going to get a heads up or anything like that. So, but I'm sure they're following the legal case closely. And then in the meantime, there's a lot of community, relief efforts and stuff like that taking place too.
Were they prepared to be as aggressive, the advocates, as say what we have seen in Minnesota, as far as vigilantly watching ICE vehicles and videotaping and whistles and stuff like that?
There were preparations along those lines, as well as some of the religious leaders who are kind of, I guess, some of the main Haitian advocates were talking about also sheltering them in their churches and basically making ICE, break down their doors if that were the case. So there's definitely plans like that, and they were watching what was happening in Minneapolis. Whether it would be as big, it's just not as many people, so it's hard to say, but certainly they're watching the situation up there.
Terry, Springfield gets all the attention because of the falsehoods that came up during the campaign, the cats and the dogs, but there's 30,000 Haitian immigrants that live here in Columbus.
Well, I think we're going to see this work out a little bit better because Mike DeWine, as governor, has a close connection to Haiti because of his late daughter and a school down there. And then also the governor lives right near Springfield, spends a lot of his life, including going to church in Springfield. And also the other thing I think is helpful in Minnesota, there's been somewhat of a tempering down of the tensions. And also Springfield itself, as I recall in the last election, actually voted more for Trump. So there's a lot of differences of Minneapolis versus Springfield. Hopefully with the time and the shifting tide, things will be managed a lot better and differently.
You think businesses are letting the Trump administration know, Springfield businesses who rely on these Haitian workers, that's kind of where this started. They all have jobs there because the companies out there couldn't find workers, they say, so the Haitian immigrants filled those positions.
It's an important point. The fact that you had the private sector, the business community, some conservative Republican-leaning business leaders bringing these Haitians in to do the work, I think there's an obligation they have to push back. But Mike, this isn't normal. I mean, this isn't how things should be. I read one report where a woman said, they're executing American citizens. What are they going to do to me? I'm Haitian. And there shouldn't be this kind of fear. And my fear is that this is no longer really about immigration enforcement. This seems to be about an intimidation campaign that the president has waged, and it's very unpopular. If you look in Minnesota after the murder of Alex Preddy, people became very concerned and started to speak out, and I think that more of that has to happen with Republicans, with business communities, with independent. This is a very unpopular thing that is happening across this country, and if you look at, and Terry sort of emphasized this, they're looking at states based on who's in charge. Are Democrats in charge? This is a Republican state. In Maine, they backed off their ICE enforcement because Susan Collins, sure enough, was saying, I've got a tough election campaign. So this is going to have consequences, I think, for the Republicans in the midterm.
We should say no one's been charged with murder in the Preddy killing. He was shot by ICE officers, immigration officers. But Terry, are Republicans losing this? They led on this immigration issue for about 10 years. But now the public is shifting. Public opinion is shifting. Are they losing the advantage they had on this issue because of the tactics?
It's shifting some, but there's a business person that I work closely with that I've talked to over the last year in the situation, and I think people have known this day is coming, at least from a year ago, because the key thing under the law passed by Congress, this is temporary. They knew it wasn't going to last forever. So I think there was already a lot of people who have left, people preparing accordingly. So again, I think we can hope the things will be managed a lot better and differently. And again, Lou's point is a good one. When you look at Ohio, it's a different circumstance than what you had in Minnesota.
John Husted, and he shows support for ICE, but he also said, you know, there's room to improve. I think that's what his exact words were when it comes to how the Trump administration is handling this.
Yeah, and that kind of goes to show completely what you're talking about with Republicans are starting to kind of back off of this a little bit, kind of being ginger about not criticizing the Trump administration too much. And then conversely, you saw Sheriff Brown go on that attack saying that Kristi Noem should be fired, which is just, for a Democrat to just run into an immigration-related issue is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and if you remember during his last campaign, he had video of him on commercials down at the border with sheriffs and things like that.
And John Husted was very clear about 3 weeks back on the Somali thing of making the point, which is important. There's a lot of Somalis, same thing on Haitians, here working hard, paying taxes, contributing. So again, the ultimate solution is how can Congress make something where you allow people a pathway, but make sure that those that don't meet the standards are not kept here.
To me, it's political. I mean, he's targeting states where he lost, where there's Democratic governors, where there's Democratic mayors. And to me, this is about trying to, frankly, intimidate your political opposition, to silence them. But also, I think there's a long-term play here to disrupt the midterms, which I think we're going to get to. President talking about nationalizing elections now, which really has landed like a lead balloon, even with a lot of conservative Republicans.
Well, let's get to the midterm elections. The 2026 campaign is officially underway. If candidates wanted to run, they had to file by Wednesday to get their names on the ballot. No real surprises on filing deadline day. All of the candidates who had already been running and raising money for months got their signatures in. In the race for governor, the candidate's fundraising is making news. Amy Acton claims to have raised a record amount for a Democrat in the past year, $5 million through January. The problem for her is her Republican opponent has raised 4 times that amount. Vivek Ramaswamy raised $20 million last year. Lou Gentile, how big a hurdle is it for Amy Acton to overcome that advantage in fundraising?
Well, I think first of all, Dr. Acton's campaign collected over 100,000 contributions from individual donors. You have about 70% of that coming from Ohioans. She will have the resources that she needs to be competitive. You're running against a billionaire. I don't think there was ever any question that he would likely have more money. So I think Dr. Acton will have the resources, I know, to be competitive. There's other elements here too. I think a lot of grassroots support, a lot of enthusiasm. And again, back to the point, I think you see President Trump now really creating a problem for Republicans, even in states like Ohio, where recent polls show him underwater about 9%. That's kind of a toxic soup coming in the midterm. So I think Dr. Acton's in a good position. She'll have to continue to work hard to raise money to be competitive. We never thought we'd outraise Vivek, but in a recent statement, you know, candidates matter, Mike. Candidates matter. And in a recent statement or an old video where Vivek was saying Medicaid and Medicare were a mistake, and Terry, you might disagree with that, I think, but about 40% or so of Ohioans who are enrolled in those programs. So we got a long way to go, and I think she'll be competitive come the fall.
Terry, Ramaswamy is Trump's candidate. He doesn't have a primary opponent because Trump endorsed him. But Trump's approval rating is about 39%. How much money does it take to overcome an approval rating that's that low in a possible wave election?
Well, the approval rating is national. In Ohio, it's a different number. It hadn't been polled lately. But money does matter, but it's not the only thing. And if you go back to the last competitive race we had for governor, it was 18, Cordray versus DeWine. They were fairly comparable in their money, what was spent on TV. Amy can be outspent if she's got a superior message, but still to get outspent too much would be a tough thing to make up for. And then there's a whole question on both sides have problems. Can they turn out parts of their base, or do people feel turned off and not excited about the election? So it's not going to be over by early March. We got a long ways to go.
So Andrew, what are you watching for? I mean, they're both doing a lot of grassroots work, visiting, counties and just shaking hands and speaking to small groups. That's what happens in this part of the campaign, and raising money. So what are you looking for? When does this thing really start to get going, the governor's race?
Well, I guess it is now. I mean, the traditional answer to that question is Labor Day, but something I'm looking for is that Vivek Ramaswamy actually got an unusually high percentage of his money from out of the state. I think that reflects kind of his national political celebrity in a way that we're not really used to here in Ohio. And I'm wondering whether national donors are going to start giving to Acton's campaign. I think that it would be pretty effective for them to basically run against Vivek Ramaswamy, kind of like the negative partisanship is what that's referred to. And so that might be a way for her to expand the amount of money that she can raise.
All right. President Trump said this week that Republicans should nationalize elections in the United States. The president's request came as he again made false claims about widespread voter fraud and stolen elections. The Constitution states elections for senators and representatives are the responsibility of the states. The president's call has gotten little support among Republican leaders in Congress. Senate Majority Leader John Thune says he is not in favor of it. House Speaker Mike Johnson says the current system works pretty well. So far, Ohio Republican leaders have not really weighed in on this proposal. Terry Casey, you're very familiar with how elections work. Is it a good idea to nationalize an election?
It's not going to happen. You can take it to the bank that it's no sale on this idea. Now, there is some points, and of course, part of the problem when he speaks on podcasts and he makes off-the-cuff comments, it's not really a good way to do policy, but this is not going to happen. And part of it is Ohio is ahead of the curve because our laws here and our election officials in the 88 counties do a good job of making sure that the voter rolls are relatively up to date. People that are deceased are taken off. Things are kept current. So Ohio's in pretty good shape. But this is something that might have created a stir, but nothing's going to happen.
Lou, this is not new. In 2000, when we had the hanging chads in Florida and all the weird stuff that was going on there was talk then of why don't we make elections for president more uniform, quote, nationalize them. So does he have a point that maybe some standardization might be in order?
I don't know. The Republican Party traditionally and historically is the states' rights party, right? And so suddenly to hear him, as his poll numbers are shrinking, as he has real concerns about his ability to be viable in the midterm, suddenly now we hear him talking about nationalizing the election. And of course, Republicans who are traditionally states' rights, they understand these are best run at the state level. Some of them are starting to speak out, even Leader Thune. But it does signal to me that, and he pointed out 15 states that he wasn't successful in. So it's concerning to me, and it should be to all of us as Americans, that this president does seem willing to do anything to sow doubt or discord about the midterm elections. And so we've got to be, I think, extraordinarily vigilant. We've seen him do this in previous elections. I think elections are run very well at the state. John Husted, our current senator, was on CNN talking about his time as the Secretary of State and how important it was to keep states administering elections. So my hope is that the Republicans will act as a backstop on this.
Have we heard from Frank LaRose, Andrew, the current Secretary of State? He's always rode that fence pretty well, saying, nationally there might be a problem, but here in Ohio we're doing it really well.
Well, he said before that federalizing the election is bad. He spoke out against a Democratic bill that would have expanded voting rights nationally. And so I assume that he would also think it would be bad if his party were to do the same thing. But, I guess I haven't heard what he actually thinks about this.
Now, the Constitution specifically says elections for senators and representatives should be run by the states. Doesn't say anything about president. So that they could tweak the laws to make it more uniform, right?
My reading of the Constitution is it says the states set the legislatures, the manner and means of election, but also it does give Congress the right to come in and set some standards. But again, these days, Congress on both sides can't agree what time of day it is or what season it is. So Congress isn't going to act. There are a few standards that have floated around over time, but again, there isn't going to be any change. It's going to be rolling ahead as we've got them right now.
So to Lou's point, is this just to sow some distrust for the midterm elections? Is that a strategy?
I don't know. It's just sometimes in podcasts you ought to be careful what questions you answer.
They did stand by it after a couple days later, too.
But the White House press secretary kind of backed off a little bit.
Yeah.
So,
well, we had the FBI raiding the Fulton County, Georgia Board of Elections because the president sold a big lie about winning the 2020 election. We know he lost the 2020 election. So I think the American people should be very concerned about this effort, even if it's to sow distrust and discord about the results of elections in certain states where Democrats seem to be winning.
All right. Testimony has begun in the trial of two former utility executives charged in Ohio's huge nuclear bailout scandal. Prosecutors say former First Energy CEO Chuck Jones and Senior Vice President Mike Dowling paid a nearly $4.5 million bribe to Sam Randazzo just before Governor DeWine named him as the state's top utility regulator. In his opening statements, The executive's attorney said the money given to Randazzo was to settle clients' claims, but Randazzo kept the money for himself. So he said it was not a bribe. Of course, Randazzo cannot refute the claim, as he died by suicide soon after he was indicted in the scheme. Andrew Tobias, this is not a new defense strategy. We have seen it before, but to claim the dead person was responsible for the wrongdoing. That's what's happening here.
Yeah, he certainly can't defend himself. So we'll see what the jury thinks of all of that. But it's not surprising that they would, take this approach when there's a lot of text messages of them communicating with him, talking about policy, thanking him for actions that he's taking, and things like that. So the government is kind of walking through the case. It's taking a while. This trial might take 8 weeks. I'm wondering to what extent the jury is going to continue following the whole thing. They did say in their opening statement that the defense is going to make it complicated, but we're telling a simple story. And so you've seen the defense tried to get the former PUCO chair the other day to give on-the-fly legal analysis about 2016 rape cases, which the judge even said, this is pretty boring to the jury. Like, should we be doing this? So it's going to be a long trial.
Terry, that's the problem with this scandal. It's electric utilities, it's complicated, it's corporate, Even Larry Householder's case, it was federal court, we couldn't see it. Unless you were in the room, but that took 8 weeks. It was complicated and there was a lot of misdirections going on there.
Well, the key thing is any attorney can stand up in the opening statement and make claims, but then if you're sitting there as a jury, you want to know what's the evidence, either to prove or counteract what's claimed. So it will be tedious to watch, and unfortunately, a lot of the media in Columbus is not really covering this story as much as it would be nice. But again, it's tough to cover because unlike on TV and Law and Order, they don't all get it done in 55 minutes.
No, it is on TV though. It's a state trial, so there is video. So we got
that's good.
That going for us. The key date it was in December of 2018, right after Mike DeWine was elected governor before he took office. Court filings show that he, Governor DeWine, John Husted had dinner with Jones, Dowling, and the First Energy lobbyist. And after the meeting, the executives went to meet with Randazzo. To me, you have to have DeWine and or Husted testify about that meeting in this trial. Would you think so, Lou?
Yeah, I think this is a GOP scandal, period. And it's coming at a good time for Democrats in a 2026 election where there seem to be a lot of momentum in favor of the Democrats. And now you have potentially, a sitting U.S. Senator being square in the middle of this, Senator John Husted, having to answer questions about his role in all of this. So certainly could get very complicated and dicey for him throughout this year. But also, you made a point earlier that I want to come back to, which is it isn't that complicated. I mean, people's utility bills, particularly now, are through the roof. I think they can understand quite simply that this bailout contributed to that, and that the skyrocketing cost of living and utilities is connected to this corruption, and it was state level corruption.
Terry, it's not often you see a sitting office holder testify in a criminal trial. I mean, what do you think the odds are that one of these two sides, the defense or prosecutors, call the governor or lieutenant governor?
They might or might not, or there sometimes are agreements to submit evidence otherwise to verify what questions come up because governors, senators just don't have time to sit around for 2 or 3 days in a courtroom waiting to be called. So sometimes there's other ways of getting in the evidence where both sides agree on a way to do it and be more efficient. Because on both sides, if you bore the jury too much, that could be counterproductive to the side you're pushing. So we'll see how they manage it. And this judge, the attorneys for Chuck Jones and Dowling, are both very high-powered attorneys, I think directly or indirectly being paid for by the utilities. So who knows what's going to happen.
I think the jurors' boredom might subside if the sitting governor and sitting U.S. senator approach the witness stand, right, Andrew?
Yeah, they might sit up in their chairs a little bit. I wanted to say, I was in the federal courtroom during Larry Householder's trial, and I recall one of the jurors started falling asleep during the opening testimony, which was from a professor talking about energy issues. So it's difficult to package these things, and maybe calling in the governor would be a good idea then to get him to sit up.
Yeah, I mean, that way that might get the public's attention on this case again because it certainly has waned. Anyway, our last topic. Late last year, the Columbus School Board cut $50 million from its budget to erase a deficit. It was not enough. This week, they cut more money, eliminated positions, froze some salaries, and the school board president says the district may have to cut another $50 million next year. Administrators blame rising costs for employee health insurance and other expenses. They also blame recently passed state laws aimed at reducing property taxes, which of course affects the amount of revenue the school districts can collect. Terry Casey, how does the school department fix this? It just seems to be getting worse.
Well, if you actually look and talk to people like in the state Senate that looked at their budget earlier this year, they're over $300 million right now, and even in 28, they're still going to have a carryover balance, $212 million. So the Columbus schools are not quite in as dire a situation as they claim. And also, there's a lot of pressure and questions when you're down to 45,000 students. At one time, there were 129,000 students. Why they keep so many buildings that are half used or a quarter used open and being inefficient when maybe there's some other ways to save money. So there's a lot of questions. They're trying to tighten the budget. They've also got a teacher union contract that on the pay side was only good for 1 year. So they're trying to say to the teachers union, we can't give you as much money as you want.
So Lou, is this never let a crisis go to waste? It's hard to close schools. Columbus City Schools have tried for years to close some of these schools that Terry talks about. They just did it recently, in the past year. Again, four schools closed last fall, or were slated for closure. Is the school department using this to try to get some concessions from the union, try to convince neighbors and parents that we need to close some schools?
Well, I don't think you can discount, though, what has happened at the state level. I mean, the state has, for a long time now, moved away from its share of state instruction. We were at one time at 50%. Pretty soon we'll be down to 32%. As you mentioned, property tax reforms that they project will cost them $17.5 million over the next few years. The fact that we've taken $1 billion and provided private schools, vouchers or subsidies to go to private schools, and the fact that costs are going up, as Terry alluded to, the cost of utilities, the cost of transportation, some of which my understanding is the district has had to pay for private school transportation. So there are other factors, I think, to be considered here. And at the end of the day, when you tie it so closely to property taxes, you do get these inequities that exist.
Is this unique to the Columbus City Schools, Andrew, or are especially large school districts, they face the same situation around the state?
I haven't totally dialed into this issue from a statewide level, but I would just point out that a couple weeks ago that Toledo City Schools announced that they were doing layoffs, and so perhaps they're dealing with the same types of issues with dealing with a large, inventory of buildings like Terry was talking about. But yeah, Columbus is not alone on this.
And
there was a report in the fall that came out, though, that talked about Cleveland and Toledo and other school districts that would be facing similar situations.
And there's the other factor that K through 12 enrollment has shrunk dramatically in the last 10 to 15 years, around 10% or so, because the birth rate's down so much. So there's some questions on school districts whether they can operate more efficiently, and clearly Columbus schools spend about $28,000 per pupil, $1.3 billion budget. So it's not lack of money, it's a question of how the money's being spent.
To those changes in the property tax law, $17 million, sounds like a lot of money, but for the Columbus City School budget, it's really not huge. So are they blaming too much on these laws and not enough on inefficiencies? The need to close school buildings, the need to perhaps lay off teachers if there aren't that many students?
Well, I just think it's a factor. I think you have to look at property tax changes. Yes, you had a formula in place, the fair school funding formula, but if you don't fully fund that fair school funding formula, issues could arise. And as I mentioned earlier, a report came out late last fall about other districts, urban districts in particular, that are going to feel the squeeze here going forward because that school funding formula, from their perspective, wasn't fully funded.
Yep.
And so we're hearing that not just in Columbus, but around the state in the urban schools.
All right, let's get to our final off-the-record parting shots, predictions perhaps of the weeks ahead. Lou Gentile, what's up?
I just think predictions going forward as we get post-primary and into the summer and fall months, I think you'll see more Republicans now definitely worried about losing the House in the U.S. House, now worried about losing the U.S. Senate. I think you'll see more and more of them start to defect from the president and be more critical, and possibly see some high-profile departures in the White House.
All right.
Circle the date of February 18th on your calendar. That's when Columbus resident billionaire Les Wexner is due to testify before Congress. And today in the New York Times, they had a big, huge picture of him, more details out of the files on Epstein. That doesn't mean he's guilty of anything, but the attention and the interest will peak a lot on February 18th, what he's got to tell Congress.
That'll be behind closed doors. We won't see it right away, right?
I don't know. We'll see.
Andrew.
So I don't know if we talk about the state treasurer's race a lot in this show, but J.D. Vance, the vice president, endorsed Jay Edwards today, one of the candidates in that race. Vivek Ramaswamy endorsed Christina Rogner, one of the other candidates. They're both Republicans. And, you know, I don't want to overstate this, but I kind of view J.D. Vance and Vivek Ramaswamy as being rivals, and they share consultants. I think they're sort of on the same page right now, but they're not on the same page on this, and I'm just kind of keeping my eye on it and whether that turns into other things in the future.
The state treasurer's race could be a crucible in this election. That'd be
And
exciting.
Secretary of State could be an interesting race for the Democrats.
All right. Well, as a Patriots fan, I'm enjoying, of course, the Super Bowl this weekend, and also Ohio State fans. They never rooted for the Patriots because Tom Brady, a Michigan guy, was their quarterback. But now that Mike Vrabel, a Buckeye, Travion Henderson, a Buckeye, they're all of a sudden Patriots fans. So funny how that all works out. Anyway, that is Columbus on the Record for this week. We urge you to watch us online. You can watch us on demand on the brand new WOSU News YouTube channel. Go to YouTube, search for WOSU News, and click subscribe. You can also watch us on demand at WOSU.org and on the PBS app. For our crew and our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.